Welcome to This Explainer. I'm stepping in as your lead archaeologist today, and we're going to walk right onto the excavation site of one of history's absolute greatest cold cases. We're digging into the Indus Valley Civilization, so let's just jump right in. 5 million. Now, I want you to just think about that number for a second. 4,000 years ago, an estimated 5 million people completely vanished from the archaeological record. Usually, when we look at the stratigraphy of ancient collapses, we find a smoking gun, right? A catastrophic volcanic eruption, a thick layer of ash, or maybe the weapons of a conquering army left behind in the dirt. But here, nothing. They literally just stopped.
To really grasp the massive stakes of what we lost here, we have to look at the sheer unprecedented scale of this civilization at its peak, right around 2500 BCE. We're talking 1.5 million square kilometers spread across modern Pakistan, northwest India, and parts of Afghanistan. That is larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. This wasn't just some scattered collection of farming villages. Actually, scratch that. It was an absolute titan of the ancient world.
And nothing illustrates how wildly advanced they were quite like this comparison. Their largest city, Mohenjo-daro, was laid out on this precise, deliberate grid with multi-story brick houses. They had indoor plumbing and private toilets connected to underground sewers thousands of years before modern cities ever caught up. Think about this. London didn't see comparable sewage infrastructure until the 1860s. So, for millennia, ancient Mohenjo-daro probably smelled a whole lot better than Victorian England.
Flipping through our field notes, we see a hyper-organized society. They had standardized weights accurate to within 1%. 1%. They ran sophisticated maritime trade networks all the way to the Persian Gulf, and they used a remarkably intricate writing system. Cities like Mohenjo-daro were bustling hubs housing up to 40,000 residents. And yet, mysteriously, by 1700 BCE, they had completely abandoned these great urban centers. So what on earth happened during those final centuries?
Let's open Trench 1, testing the old theories. Before modern science totally revolutionized our field, we had to rely on these legacy theories. But when we actually get our hands dirty and dig into the physical record, they just do not match the evidence. Take the 19th century Aryan Invasion theory, which claimed Indo-European migrants violently conquered the area around 1500 BCE. Well, there are absolutely no mass graves, no unburied bodies, and no burned cities. Plus, the cities were already shrinking way before this supposed invasion even happened. Then, in the 1990s, geologists pitched the earthquake hypothesis, that tectonic shifts destroyed the water supply. And sure, we do see some localized earthquake damage at certain sites, but seismic events simply cannot explain a simultaneous collapse across 1.5 million square kilometers. The scale is just entirely wrong.
The crucial takeaway here is that the civilization was kind of already unraveling before any significant migration occurred. The stratigraphic timeline simply does not support a sudden, violent end to this massive society. Any migration likely happened later, meaning it wasn't the cause of the collapse. They were already unraveling all on their own. So to find out why, we have to look past the old history books.
Moving on to Trench 2, the modern lab.
This is where modern science steps in to entirely rewrite this cold case. A landmark 2012 study published in Nature analyzed ancient lake sediments from across South Asia. They mapped a catastrophic, centuries-long weakening of the region's vital monsoon rainfall, starting right around 2500 BCE. By 1900 BCE, that lack of reliable water triggered massive crop failures, causing the populations of these major cities to rapidly collapse. And by 1700 BCE, most of the great urban centers were completely empty.
Now, you might be wondering how we know exactly what the rain was doing 4,000 years ago. Well, we know this thanks to environmental records like speleothems. These are mineral deposits formed from groundwater in caves, and modern climate scientists use them to accurately reconstruct ancient weather patterns. It's basically like digging up an ancient climate hard drive. Using data from lake sediments, river geology, and these speleothems, multiple independent studies all point to the exact same conclusion. The climate changed, and it changed at the absolute worst possible time for an agricultural society relying entirely on predictable river floods.
The physical landscape was permanently altered. The ancient Rakhigarhi River, which was literally the lifeblood flowing right through the heart of Indus territory, completely dried up. A brilliant 2023 study confirmed this river wasn't fed by melting Himalayan glaciers like we once thought. It was entirely monsoon-fed, meaning when the rains died, the river died, and the hundreds of agricultural settlements that depended on it, they died right along with it.
Which brings us to the peaceful migration.
As a lead archaeologist, what absolutely fascinates me most is that the absence of mass graves points not to some violent apocalypse, but to a brilliant, desperate human adaptation. The artifact record maps out exactly how they survived. Step 1, the climate worsens and agriculture fails in the Indus heartland. But step 2, the population doesn't just sit there and starve. They execute a managed, highly strategic migration eastward toward the Ganges Plain, where the rainfall was far more reliable. Step 3, they deliberately abandon their sprawling urban centers for smaller, more sustainable rural settlements. And step 4, we know it was them because we see a perfect continuity of Indus-style pottery, tools, and practices in these new eastern regions. The cities vanished, sure, but the people actually survived by packing up and moving.
Next up, decoding ancient DNA.
A massive 2019 study finally puts the nail in the coffin of those old invasion theories we talked about earlier. But to fully grasp why the genetic extracts from this ancient skeleton are so groundbreaking, we need to quickly define steppe ancestry. Basically, this is a specific genetic signature associated with the migration of Indo-European populations from Central Asia. If an invasion had happened, we would see this signature heavily mixed into the local remains exactly at the time of the collapse.
But here is the massive revelation from the Rakhigarhi site. The skeleton they analyzed showed absolutely no significant steppe ancestry. None. The DNA extracts reveal she was from a distinctly local population. This definitively proves that the Indus people were not suddenly replaced by some violent invading force from the north.
Instead, her genetic affinity strongly links to modern South Asian populations. The Indus people were not replaced. They mixed, they moved, and they adapted. This civilization ended in absorption, not extinction. This genetic data is incredible because it proves that the Indus people's legacy is still alive, pulsing through the populations of South Asia right now. Finally, let's look at the artifacts we can't read.
You know, intellectual honesty is what separates good history from mythology, so we have to admit what our current site reports still can't explain. We have some massive blind spots. First and foremost, the Indus script. We have over 4,000 inscribed objects featuring around 400 distinct signs, and they are completely undeciphered. Without a bilingual Rosetta Stone, we are totally blind to what language they spoke. Then there's their political structure. There are no obvious palaces, no central government buildings, or royal tombs overflowing with wealth. Do they have a king? A merchant republic? We literally have no idea. And the cultural transition between the Indus and the later Vedic culture still remains hotly contested among scholars. But despite these blind spots, the hard physical evidence tells a clear, undeniable story. As one scholar put it, the Indus civilization didn't fall the way Rome fell, with armies and fire. It faded the way a language fades, gradually, unevenly, as its people transformed and adapted to a radically changing Earth.
The greatest revelation from the trenches is that those 5 million people didn't just vanish into thin air, they became us. Through migration and adaptation, they survived, became the modern populations of South Asia. But the mystery remains, leaving us with one lingering, absolutely incredible question. Will we ever crack their code, decipher their script, and finally hear their ancient voices tell their own story? Thanks for stepping onto the site and exploring this explainer with me today.